in the context of chronic disease, I do not believe that there is such a thing called healthy whole grains. And of course, I don't believe that we should be using sugar. I personally I don't eat it. I don't think there is a safe amount as far as sugar goes.
Welcome to the Wise Traditions podcast, sponsored by the Weston A. Price Foundation for Wise Traditions in Food, Farming, and the Healing Arts. We are your source for scientific knowledge and traditional wisdom to help you achieve optimal health.
I'm your host, Hilda Labrada Gore. This is episode 146, and my guest is Miriam Kalamian. Miriam is an educator and author specializing in the ketogenic diet as a therapy for healing. She has a master's in nutrition and is the author of Keto for Cancer. Most of us see the keto diet as a way of eating to lose weight or get our bodies into better shape. Miriam got into it as a result of an intensely personal experience. In 2004, her young son, Rafi, was diagnosed with brain cancer. When conventional treatments failed to turn things around, Miriam stumbled upon research that indicated that diet could be used to treat cancer. Today we discuss the core tenets of the ketogenic diet, how it can help improve your health, how you can discern if it's right for you, and its role in helping cancer patients not only live longer, but also enjoy a much higher quality of life. Before we dive into the conversation, a quick word from the Weston A. Price Foundation. We are committed to helping you and the world eat better. Join hands with us by making a donation today to pass health on to the next generation. Just go to our website, westonaprice.org, and make a gift of any size. And thank you in advance. Hey, everybody, and come on out to our conference in November in Baltimore. It's a wonderful gathering full of like-minded people with amazing food and quality speakers. Or you could say it's got quality food and amazing speakers. Either way, you're going to want to join us. Go to wisetraditions.org to register today. Welcome to Wise Traditions, Miriam.
Thank you, Hilda. I'm very happy to be here.
I am so excited because I feel like keto is the rage. Every time I turn around, someone's talking about keto. Tell us a little bit about the keto diet just to kick things off here.
Well, keto diet, yes. It's been around for almost 100 years, kind of flying under the radar in the epilepsy world. That's where it was developed as actual nutritional therapy to help children who had intractable epilepsy. So it gained traction there, and then it sort of lost ground with the introduction of some of the anti-seizure medications, which basically weren't very effective for kids and had all kinds of side effects. Came back into prominence in the mid-90s through Charlie Abrams' success with it. So Jim and Nancy Abrams, Charlie Foundation, kinds of information, and even a movie. Jim is a director and a writer, and they produced a film with Meryl Streep called First Do No Harm. So that's how it sort of regained its position. But all this time, they were also doing a lot of research and looking at it for obesity and starting to look at it for diabetes. They had looked at it early on, but again, lost favor with some diabetes medications, particularly insulin coming on the scene.
Interesting. And now in the magazines and the social media, we see stars touting it as a weight loss method, right?
Oh, yeah. And that is a double-edged sword. So yes, you get the celebrity weight loss stories, and that's what helped to make it visible. But also it's so much more than weight loss, so much more. So it's about health improvement. It's about, improving your metabolism and your health span and all kinds of wonderful things. And in my case, it's also as a nutritional therapy for cancer.
Absolutely. So what are some of the core tenets of the keto diet?
Okay, a ketogenic diet is a low carbohydrate diet. And I should stress it's a very low carbohydrate diet. We're talking about somewhere around in the neighborhood of 50 grams of carb a day or less in order to get into that state, to maintain that state of ketosis. And that is where you're using fats as your primary fuel. And one of the products of using fats are these little molecules, and they are synthesized into ketone bodies, which are energy molecules. And that's what our brains just love ketones, and our muscles and our hearts can use ketones. There's very few tissue that doesn't use ketones or fatty acids. So yeah, it's just a shift from what we call glucocentric. That means taking in a lot of carbohydrates and using that as your primary energy, and adipocentric, which is using fats for energy.
How do people know, Miriam, if the ketogenic diet is right for them?
That it can vary greatly depending on what you're using it for. So there are some what they call absolute contraindications. Those are inborn errors in metabolism that are identified in early childhood and make it impossible to use the diet because people aren't able to metabolize fats the way that we're intended to. Then there's a whole much longer list of things that can happen over time that make it more challenging. Like one of my biggest challenges with cancer is if somebody is malnourished or underweight coming into it, because ketogenic is not a weight gain diet. If you've learned anything from the populist view of ketogenic, it's that it's a weight loss diet, not a weight gain diet. So there's things besides weight, certain health conditions or places that people are at in terms of their environment. They don't have any social support and they can't get out to do the shopping. How are you going to be keto?
So it's not going to be for the person who is underweight or struggling in the ways you mentioned.
Yeah, if somebody is underweight, I prefer to do a low carb diet, not a ketogenic diet. And there's some other things that I think work for somebody who's underweight. There's a big difference in doing this for weight loss and in doing it for cancer. There are nuances for cancer.
Well, let's stick with cancer since your book is entitled Keto for Cancer. How is it that this diet in particular helps cancer patients?
One of the main drivers for cancer is a shift in the way that cells use glucose. So they don't run it through the normal, healthy mitochondrial pathway. They ferment it. The cancer cells ferment glucose very inefficiently and making a lot of acid in the process. It makes a lot of lactic acid. And that is, when we think about how cancer thrives in an acidic environment, that's what we're talking about. We're not talking about whether your urine is acid or alkaline, which is like what the alkaline diets are all about.
Well, so when I think keto, tell me if this is right, Miriam. When I think keto, I think of fat, a primarily fat-centric diet. Is that the crux of it?
It's a combination of limiting the carbohydrates, like I said, down to about 50 grams or lower. Sometimes, with the people I work with in cancer, it's around 20 grams. And when your carbohydrate intake is that low, your body has to make up its energy deficit by burning fat. And that's a wonderful thing. It's evolutionary biology at its best. It's this exquisite adaptation. And we burn fat. And we make these ketone bodies in the process, and we burn those as well for energy. And they're a much cleaner burning fuel than glucose, particularly for cancer.
So do you understand this intellectually or physically? Like, have you lived this out, Miriam? That's what I'm wondering.
Oh, yeah. I've lived it out myself. I am ketogenic. I think everyone my age that is healthy enough to do this can benefit by it. But I also lived it, the experience with my son, Rafi. He was diagnosed with a brain tumor when he was 4 years old, and it was huge, size of an orange in a 4-year-old's head. Oh. And they told us inoperable. And so, we did like 14 months of weekly chemotherapy. And that didn't stop the cancer from growing. And then we did another chemo, and that didn't stop it from growing. And then we did 2 surgeries, and we did a lot of damage, and it was still growing. Then a 9-week clinical trial. And so by that time, he was 7, and this was raging out of control, and we were at the end of our rope with this. So I was not looking for a diet, Hilda. I was looking online at a chemo drug he was on, and I accidentally found this study that had just been published. Dr. Seyfried's lab at Boston College, and it was about a ketogenic diet and brain tumor, and thought, well, I'll take this to the oncologist and see what he says. His reaction was, he rolled his eyes, it's not going to work. And it's like, well, but is it going to harm him? Because we don't really have anything else we can do right now. He was going to move him to palliative care. And it would, no, it's not going to harm him. So, well, why wouldn't I want to do this? Because it's not going to work. Well, that wasn't a good enough reason not to do it when you're about to lose your little guy. So we put him on the diet, and in 3 months, he had this just amazing response to dietary therapy and nutritional. All we did was take the carbohydrates out of his diet. And we saw finally, we saw a positive thing going on. And he lived for 6 years on a ketogenic diet, mostly good quality of life in that time. And that just wasn't in the cards for him at that stage.
Wow. That must have been nigh miraculous.
That's what it felt like. I think, we were hoping for any kind of a response, anything that could slow this train wreck down. And instead we got an amazing response to treatment. And I was blown away. And because I was so blown away, it's like, now I got to learn everything I can about nutrition. I got to unlearn what I know or what I currently believe. And I got to relearn this whole other way of eating. And that's what I did. I had no background in nutrition, but I did have the desire to learn and quite a powerful motivator. So I went back to school, got my master's in human nutrition, and the whole time focused on ketogenic rather than the dietary guidelines that I knew weren't going to help them. And that's what I'm still doing now. I wrote the book, but I also work with people, and I speak at conferences, and I do whatever I can to develop this awareness of this nutritional therapy that can be used alongside whatever it is you're doing.
I wonder why so many of us think diet doesn't matter. When we find we are in a health crisis, we just immediately go to the professionals in the white coats and think we're just going to take all the pills or all the protocol. But generally, nutrition doesn't seem to play a part in it, does it?
Well, the doctors in their white coats are not trained in nutrition. So in medical school, they get virtually no training. Medical schools, this is not a conspiracy theory, I'm just stating fact. Medical schools are funded by pharmaceutical companies. The training, and it is training that that doctors get, has to do with pharmaceuticals, has to do with diagnostics, algorithms, pharmaceuticals. It does not have anything to do with nutrition. They hire, within their practices, they hire registered dietitians, and this hasn't caught on yet in the registered dietitian world. I suspect at some point there will be more of a major break, and there will be registered dietitians who are willing to step out of the box. There are a few right now, but they're scarce as hen's teeth.
That's why I'm glad we're having this conversation, Miriam, because there are people listening to us who might have just clicked on this episode because they have a loved one who's dealing with cancer, and they want to know, how can the ketogenic diet help them?
Oh my God, Hilda, you've hit on something that really touches me every day. And that is every day when I get up in the morning and I open my inbox, there are emails in there from people with a loved one who has just been diagnosed with cancer or is at the end of their rope, like we were, with conventional care and being shunted off to palliative care every day. So there's a huge awareness among a certain segment of people, and they tend to be the, people in their sort of 20s, 30s, 40s. Older people may come across it, but more often they're guided there by their adult children. So I'm hearing from the adult children, I'm hearing from cousins and nieces and nephews, and they are very on board with this as something that might benefit their loved one. But boy, the person with the disease has to also be on board.
Interesting. Yeah, because I interviewed someone recently who was saying too, that the person who has the sickness needs to believe and needs to be willing to take the steps. Otherwise, it's just you're pushing something on someone who doesn't want to go through it, right?
Absolutely. What I tell people is I'm here to educate and inform, but I don't coerce or proselytize. So, I want to help you understand why this may benefit you, but ultimately diet is a choice. I believe that diet does matter, but diet is a choice. So support the person with cancer in any way that you can. But education is huge. People are just not aware of it, or they may have a false equivalency with some other anti-cancer ways of eating, like the alkaline diet is set out there as, since cancer thrives in a acidic environment, we want to be, alkaline. Mm-hmm. That's not going to slow cancer down. That's going to change the pH of your urine, but it won't slow cancer down, because the acidity is happening at the cellular level, and just outside the cell. It's not happening at the system level like that.
And so how is it, let's talk a little bit about the science here. How is it that keto does affect the system?
So when you are ketogenic, it means you're not taking in very much in the way of carbohydrates. And carbohydrates are basically glucose. There's some fructose involved in there and some lactose in there, but it's glucose that cells can use directly to meet their energy needs. So, we have glucose transporters, and we have insulin receptors, and it brings glucose into the cells where it's utilized for energy. And the problem with cancer is the cell stops using glucose in the normal way, which is in the mitochondria, and starts fermenting it like crazy in the cytoplasm of the cell. So, it's increasing the number of glucose transporters on the cell and insulin receptors to bring it into the cell. And so that's allowing cancer to proliferate and spread to other areas. So it's once that cell becomes deranged in this way, it just requires more and more glucose. And it ferments some other fuels too, like glutamine.
Oh, and so by lowering your carb intake, you're lowering the food essentially for these cancer cells. You're starving them to death.
You're starving them, yeah. And actually, I think of it more this way. It's an austerity program. So when there's less nutrients available, then the cell signaling is this. It's like, oh, guys, we don't have enough for everybody. So we're going to start like rationing. We're going to do this rationing. And we're going to focus on providing the nutrients to you healthy cells over here, because we need you in order to stay alive. And you dysfunctional cells over here, including you cancer cells, I'm sorry, we don't have enough for you right now. So that's what happens with a ketogenic diet. It's this cellular perception that there isn't enough nutrition to fuel this unlimited growth. And so when the body is switching to using fat, that's very similar to what you would experience in a starvation state. Okay, there's none of this glucose coming in. We've got to use fat for energy instead. And we're going to, make up the balance of that with some, ketones here. We're going to make just the amount of glucose that red blood cells need and a few other tissues need. But there's not this abundance of energy. But on the other hand, when you eat like people do today, have all this availability of food and this overnutrition, then what you're signaling is that, hey guys, look, that we have this bounty, and we're going to share it with everybody. So you get this and you get this, and cancer cells, why not? You get this too. So they get not only the nutrition, but since they're just set, they're in hyperdrive for growth, they get all of the growth factors they need as well to proliferate.
Do you ever look back at when your child was little and that tumor kept growing and growing despite the treatment and the surgeries, and wonder, how are we fueling that, right? Do you ever look back and think about that?
Of course. And I look at what went on in the cancer treatment room and still goes on in cancer treatment rooms. And that is when there's a birthday, they celebrate it with cake and ice cream. When somebody's, weight is they're losing weight because their GI tract is trashed by chemotherapy. And so it becomes difficult to eat a lot of the things that would maintain their weight. And so they're encouraged to drink things like Ensure and Boost, which is just sugar molecules, basically. And protein and whatever, but it's the sugar molecules that are just going to keep driving the cancer along. So yeah, I look at that and I go, that's nuts. And to say diet doesn't matter is just at its best, it's a naive statement, and at its worst, it's really dangerous. And it proves fatal for a lot of people.
I'm just shaking my head in sadness about that and how uninformed the medical community can be at times. Susan Johnson, who I interviewed, and she is the one who founded Kick Cancer to help children with cancer, said the same thing when her son was going through cancer treatment. They were like, just let him eat whatever he wants. The idea is to keep the weight on. So it's all about shakes with a lot of sugar or this or that. And she just realized how unhelpful that was.
There is a recommendation from the American Cancer Association. I have a slide on this in in several of my presentations, and the advice was to use ice cream as a topping on cake. That's how you're going to maintain your weight. But what that's going to do is maintain your fat. It doesn't do anything in terms of the health of your body. And ultimately, it even fails to maintain your fat, because once cancer has progressed to a certain point, it's actually signaling for the breakdown of tissue, muscle mass, fat mass, whatever it can grab in order to get the nutrients it needs to keep going. It's in control. It's in the driver's seat.
Coming up, Miriam explains why the default approach to any health crisis is to turn to doctors and drugs. And she also goes into how ketogenic diet therapy can be a safe and natural alternative. We pause now for a quick word from the Weston A. Price Foundation. And when I say quick, I'm not kidding. We just want to ask you straight up to partner with us in getting this critical health information out to the masses. Right now, it's our fundraising drive to support education, research, and activism. So just go to our website, westonaprice.org/donate, and give a gift of any size. And thank you. And we also want to connect with you face-to-face. Virtual connections are awesome, of course, but there's nothing like being with people in person. So join us in Baltimore at the Wise Traditions Conference, November 16th to the 19th. We'll all be there. Sally Fallon Morell, Chris Masterjohn, Dr. Tom Cowan, Natasha Campbell-McBride, and many other powerful, knowledgeable speakers. And I'll be there too, of course. So go to wisetraditions.org to sign up today. Oh, and hey, for you East Coasters, the DC Weston A. Price Foundation chapter is putting on a special event in August on the 18th called The Nourished Life. Sally's going to speak about her latest book, Nourishing Diets. She'll go into what our paleo and ancestral, traditional ancestors really ate. And we'll also have a panel of farmers who will help us figure out how to nourish ourselves best today. Plus, we're going to have a farm fresh, delicious lunch and all of that for just like $35. So go to the events page on the westonaprice.org website and sign up today. I will see you there. My question is, let's say someone is listening right now and they have a loved one who's been diagnosed, or maybe they're the one who's been diagnosed with cancer. How would they get started on this Keto for Cancer plan?
Oh, of course, I would say read my book. There is very little online about cancer. There's all this information about weight loss, and now there's all this information about diabetes. But people are just not as familiar. You know, I look at all the new books coming out. Some of them are just really super books on keto, and they'll have like a paragraph on cancer, and it will usually be very non-committal, or they'll talk about the, speculation that a ketogenic diet might help, but we need the research. Of course, we need the research. We need the research to figure out which cancers are going to be impacted most by this therapy, which may not be impacted much at all. And I think by far we're looking at, and that's another question I get a lot, is my cancer going to respond to this? And my answer is, do they use PET scans to look at this? Are they looking for metabolic activity? If they're looking for metabolic activity, or they're using PET scans that rely on glucose tracers, and that's how they can see these hyper metabolic areas that indicate cancer, then why not give it a try? Mm-hmm. Why not see if you can impact your cancer by changing just the mix of what you eat? You look at a lot of the people I work with are coming from healthy whole food diets. They already know how to cook, but they're using a lot of grains because it seems like it's okay, 45 to 65% healthy whole grains. Well, in the context of chronic disease, I do not believe that there is such a thing called healthy whole grains. And of course, I don't believe that we should be using sugar. I personally I don't eat it. I don't think there is a safe amount as far as sugar goes. And, I just see it as toxic. A little bit that might sneak in here and there is probably not going to matter, but thinking that you can have teaspoon here and honey there and date sugar there, it all adds up and it's all sugar.
Yeah, it really surprises me sometimes in this foodie movement, slow food movement that I've been part of, how many, healthy treats I see on Instagram or this or that. And I'm like, wow, somebody's got a sweet tooth. We're feeding our bodies on that glucose, like you were saying, and when maybe they were designed to feed on something else.
I tell you, I almost got kicked out of my health club because somebody asked me, knowing that I'm a nutritionist, they asked me about this bar. And I looked at the bar and I was just sitting there. I mean, I wasn't proselytizing, I was educating. And what I said was, well, it's date sugar. It's got like whatever, I don't remember how many grams of carbohydrate coming from date sugar. Date sugar, it doesn't matter what the source of the sugar is. Sugar is sugar. And that kind of filtered back to management. And they thought that I was giving some really bad advice and that I needed to be stopped. I needed to be blocked from giving that kind of advice. Like I said, it wasn't advice. I'm just educating that sugar is sugar, no matter what the source.
Miriam, you're our kind of lady. We love people that just say it like it is. And this information is valuable. I think our listeners are going to appreciate it. The foundation, we're about, some level of carbs and grains, but we also tell people this. They need to listen to their own bodies and they need to figure out what works best for them with everything that we're putting out there. So I'm really glad we've had you on the show so they can really consider how their balance of macros is going to be and what they're feeding in their bodies. This is super.
I tell you, almost everybody that I work with and out there that I meet, I mean, I go to yoga and then I go out to, we go out for me, it's tea afterwards. Mm-hmm. And for my friends, there they are. They know what I do. They know what I believe and think, but I'm not the diet police. And they're sitting there eating some big supersized pastry. And they'll get several of them and split it up and share it around. And I'm just thinking, oh my God, you're just undoing all of the good stuff we just did in yoga, and you're undoing it with your food choices. And it's sad. I feel genuinely sad for people who either believe it doesn't matter or feel that they can't make that kind of a commitment. They can't make that lifestyle change. But I'll tell you, cancer is a motivator. So, even if somebody has not done well with using a low carb diet in the past for weight loss, and they come to me already knowing what it's going to involve. So, I don't even need that part of the education. They know what they're going to need to do. They just need my help in fine tuning it for cancer. And it's like the motivation there is so different than it is for weight loss.
So true. But wouldn't it be nice if people could make those changes before they hit the pain point of cancer?
Oh, you bet. You bet. Now, I don't know for a fact that a ketogenic diet is a cancer prevention diet. I think there's a lot more out there. You look at brain cancer, I think it has very little to do. The initiation of that has very little to do with diet and everything to do with either internal wiring gone wrong or something in the environment. There was a paper that came out recently that I was looking at that was suggesting it could be cell phone usage and the mechanism behind why it might be, and why it might be just an increase in radiation in the atmosphere. Not that it is. I'm not going to commit. But when you look at the incidence, and this was a UK study, of the incidence of glioblastoma doubling in recent decades, there's some driver there. And I don't think that the initiation has to do with diet, but other lifestyle factors. But then you look at other cancers, like breast cancer, not younger people, but older women, postmenopausal women that develop breast cancer. How much of it is about diet and what they might have done in the past to head this off? How much of it is exercise? How much of it is circadian rhythm? How much of it is how well their immune system is functioning? Because we know that changes over time. But boy, there's so much we can do to improve all of the lifestyle stuff. And that we're not doing. And my feeling is like, we're not going to be able to do it all, but even if you could do 80% of it, 80% of the time, I think we'd be in a lot better shape as a nation and we'd see a lot fewer of these devastating cancers that we see with, breast cancer being one, colon cancer is another that we see developing in the older population. I think there are important differences between an early onset of these diseases and the more traditional, getting into your 50s, 60s, and 70s and developing a cancer.
I agree. Well, this leads me to my last question. If the listener, Miriam, could only do one thing to improve their health, what would you recommend that they do?
Yes. I knew this was coming, so I put some thought into it. And I would say stop grazing. We're not cattle. If you're hungry in between meals and there's something wrong with your food choices, and most likely you're way too reliant on carbohydrates. And when you think about it, each of those times that you eat, you are spiking glucose, you're spiking insulin, you're creating this inflammation and insulin resistance in your body that leads to more hunger, and that keeps the cycle going. So that's setting the stage. So you do decades of this, and sets the stage for the chronic diseases that ruin our quality of life from midlife on. And I have this wonderful study, and I would love to share it with your listeners. And it has nothing to do, this is why I just thought it would be perfect, nothing to do with food quality, the type of diet. It's not about vegan or Mediterranean or keto or any of that. It was strictly to do with meal timing. And what the study did is it took some data from the NHANES nurses study, and it looked at the food logs of the nurses, and it showed that when they did an analysis of this data, that women that had been diagnosed with early stage breast cancer who fasted less than 13 hours a day, and again, this was not deliberate fasting, they were just looking at the timing of the food intake. But women that had fasted for less than 13 hours a day had a 36% increased risk of recurrence. This is not about exercise. This is not about whether their circadian rhythms were shot or not, because nurses, a lot of them are working night shifts.
Mm-hmm.
This was about the risk of recurrence in people who did not stop eating for a long enough period of time to allow their bodies to rest, digest, clear out the dead cells, which is what we do overnight, and restore metabolic health. We could spend the next hour on this easily, but I would like to send you that study, because I know that not all of your listeners are going to be like, oh yeah, I'm going to jump on the keto bandwagon. But everybody can limit the number of hours that they're eating in a day, and that I'd be willing to bet my life, because this is what I do. I'd be willing to bet my life that is going to improve health and reduce the burden of chronic disease.
Well, thank you for bringing that to our attention. We can put a link in the show notes to that study that you're mentioning, because it does sound fascinating. And this whole conversation has been amazing. I will also put a link in the show notes to your book. And I just really appreciate your taking this time, Miriam. It has been a pleasure.
It's been great, and I hope that anybody interested in this is going to get up to speed on how to do this properly as a nutritional therapy for cancer.
Fantastic. Well, thanks again, Miriam, and we look forward to talking to you sometime soon.
Oh, thank you. Bye-bye, Hilda.
My guest today was Miriam Kalamian. You can find her book, Keto for Cancer, on the Chelsea Green publishing site, chelseagreen.com, or on Amazon. And for the show notes from today's episode with links, etc., just go to our website, westinaprice.org, and look for the show notes for episode 146. While you're clicking around online, go to Apple Podcasts to subscribe to the show. There's always something amazing right around the corner, as you know. And while you're on Apple Podcasts, you might as well rate and review us while you're there. Thanks so much. Hey, next week we are going to be talking about the beauty and benefits of cooking. I've been surprised, quite honestly, by how often guests will say at the end of the show that cooking is the one thing we should do to improve our health. Sally Fallon Morell has said it, Joel Salatin has said it, there's a theme here. So next week I've invited my friend and fellow Weston A. Price Foundation foodie, Nevra Ledwin, to be on the show. Nevra is super knowledgeable, and she has a fabulous way of explaining things that is super clear-cut and motivating. So get ready to roll up your sleeves and get cooking with us with next week's episode. I'll wrap it up now with a big thank you to our team of podcast interns. Post-production assistants include Deirdre Beard, Diva Rizvi, Melanie Ahern, and Ari O'Hara. Cheryl Huftelin helps with social media. Mary Hine, Olga de Villiers, Joy de los Santos, and Cynthia Castro Cohen Enriquez boost sponsorship and help with special projects. The listening team includes Heather Carpentier and Victor Coseto. And Amy Matias lends a hand with transcriptions. Thanks to each and every one of you. I love you so much and appreciate you greatly. Last but not least, everybody, let's stay connected. I'm on Twitter at Holistic Hilda, on Instagram at Holistic_Hilda. I'm happy to help you with your podcasting or wellness journey. Hope to see you soon.
Have you been enjoying these podcasts? Have you benefited from them or from the resources on the website or local chapter meetings? If so, please become a member of the Weston A. Price Foundation. It's only $25 for students and seniors and $40 for a general membership. Your contribution is critical for the continued work of the foundation. Wise Traditions is brought to you by the Weston A. Price Foundation for Wise Traditions in Food, Farming, and the Healing Arts. The content of this podcast is provided for informational purposes only and is not intended as a substitute for medical advice.